Hey everybody, I'm David with Bolivar Live, and we've got a special show today. I'm here with Chandra Franklin Womack from Aaron and Franklin Engineering, and they helped us tremendously over here in the rebuild process after Ike. But what we're going to talk about today is TWIA. She also sits on the board as a chair on the board and has been on there since I believe 2015, if I'm not mistaken, Chandra.
Yes, sir.
Um, Today I don't own a home down here. I rent a home, so TWIA is nothing to me. But the homeowners, TWIA is a big part of Bolivar Peninsula, and today we're gonna go through step by step. We're gonna dive into what TWIA is, who manages it, who's on the board, how's it funded, the cost increase, who uses it, and when you need it. And Chandra's gonna she's taken time today to talk to us about every step of this. And so, Chandra, TWIA, it's a big part of Texas. And as we were talking earlier, every state, coastal state, has their own. Some are state run, some are independent. TWIA is independent, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. So TWIA, people have this misconception that TWIA is a state agency, but it's actually not a state agency. It's a residual market property insurance company. So it's basically its own insurance company. It was created in 1971 by the Texas legislature to provide wind and hail insurance for the seacoast. And, we're governed under the property insurance code and by the Commissioner of Insurance. So the board is actually appointed by the commissioner, so we fall under them, but we're actually a separate entity from the state.
So it's not a state agency.
It is not.
Okay.
No, sir.
On day to day, who manages TWIA? Is it the board? Is it an individual? Is it the state?
The board actually just acts as an oversight group. The day-to-day operations are managed by the TWIA general manager, who is currently David Durden. Last year, we went through an exhaustive search to find a new general manager. Our general manager was retiring. So David had been working with the association for over a decade, and he had worked with the legislature before he came into TWIA. So he had a great, background in legislative affairs as well as the inner workings of TWIA. He was their legal counsel. So he has really stepped into that role and has taken it on. And the board, I think, made a really good decision in hiring David. He seems to be a great leader that's going to really push us into the next, echelons of what TWIA needs to be.
Well, you've sat on the board since 2015. That's a pretty good run,
Yeah.
and you've got a lot of knowledge. Who else? Who's on the board of directors?
So there's actually 9 different directors, and they've changed over the years. But basically, the representation is they want 3 coastal representatives. They want 3 different people that are going to represent the coastal interests, and that's that's my role. I'm a coastal representative. Then they have 3 people that are inland representatives, people that are at least 100 miles from the coast, so that they can represent the inland representatives. And then they have the industry, which is the insurance industry. And so these are people that are writing policies in the coastal region. So we try to catch, all 3 areas to get a balance, of the board, because if it was all industry or if it was all coastal, you'd never really
You'd
make
go
any
one way or
progress.
another.
Right. So it's a balance.
Who's TWIA funded by? Is it tax revenue? Is it premiums? Who pays for it?
So TWIA doesn't receive any tax revenue or any other state funds for the association. They have a tiered funding structure that's set out by the legislature. Every year, TWIA has to make a decision about what that 1 in 100 funding looks like. So if we had a catastrophe, a 1 in 100 year catastrophe, what kind of funding would we need to cover that? And right now, our purchase is 4.5 billion. That's the 2023 hurricane season. So we have to have enough funding to cover a catastrophe of 4.5 billion. So we have a tiered funding structure. It comes out of the TWIA premiums first and our other revenue. Every year, if we have excess, we put into what's called the Catastrophe Reserve Trust Fund, which is managed by the Comptroller's Office. And currently, that fund has $238 million in it as of March 31st. So we've got a nest egg there for immediate payment of claims if something were to happen. And then it starts getting into these class 1, 2, and 3 public securities and assessments that are for the insurance companies. So we go through all that funding first, and then once we get to the end of that, then we go to reinsurance. So that reinsurance fills that final gap to get us to that 4.5 million. So it's a lot of money, to be prepared, because you never know if there's going to be a storm every year. We have the same chance this year as we had last year as the year before. We just got lucky those years. We've been lucky since Ike, right?
Knock on wood,
We've been lucky since Ike to not really have a major storm. And we had Harvey, and that was really a flood event for this area. It really wasn't a wind event, but the Rockport Corpus area, it was a pretty significant event, and we actually paid out a lot of money for those claims, and those are still ongoing, a lot of them actually.
So what does a TWIA policy cover exactly, so people know, hey, I need to look into this, and then we'll get into areas.
So whenever you buy your TWIA policy, or your insurance, you've got flood, you've got your homeowners, and you've got your wind. Well, TWIA only covers wind and hail. That's it. Your regular homeowners policy won't cover it, and so you have to buy this separate policy that will cover the wind and hail. The problem is that the TWIA policy, we don't write policies. We don't have agencies. We have to let the independent agents write those policies for us when they're doing your full policy. When you're writing your flood, when they're writing your homeowners, they also have to write our policy for us as well.
Okay. Let's talk about areas and designated areas, catastrophes, what's covered, how far inland y'all cover, because there's a limit there.
Yes, there is. So basically, if you look along the Texas Gulf Coast, there are 14 coastal counties. And those 14 coastal counties are what's considered the windstorm region. And there's also a couple little small areas that are carved out in Harris County, east of 146, Morgan's Point, Seabrook, Kemah, that whole area on the east side of 146. And then there's a few other small areas, but for the most part, it's really just those 14 coastal counties that are called the Tier 1 counties. And that's where the highest damage is going to be, and the highest, risk is going to be for TWIA or for any insurer.
Okay. Y'all have a meeting coming up, or had a meeting on Tuesday, and we're going to do another show on that. But what's the increased cost of construction coverage? That's a separate policy, if I'm not mistaken.
So it's a rider to your TWIA policy. So as every year when you're looking at your TWIA policy, you need to be thinking about, a lot of times people are just looking at straight costs, like what is my premium going to be this year? Mm-hmm. But you also have to look at what does it cover? Is it going to actually cover what it's going to take to rebuild that structure back to the current code? So say you have a little bit older structure, you get some damage and you have to rebuild it. Well, you can't rebuild it the way that it was constructed previously. You have to build it to maybe a new flood code, maybe a new wind code. There may be additional brackets, hold downs, limited products that you can use. So that increased cost would be absorbed by the TWIA policy, whereas otherwise you're limited to a dollar value that the home was, where it was originally valued whenever you took the policy on. So if you don't keep moving that policy value up, you're not going to be covered. It's just like if your home value goes up, you don't want to be paid for that lower value. So having that ICC coverage can be really beneficial. And a lot of people don't really look at it because it does increase the premium a little bit.
But if you have an older home, built post-Ike, or pre-Ike, I should say, mm-hmm. This is something that you need to look at versus if you had one post-Ike.
Yeah, the post-Ike stuff, I mean, the code for post-Ike, flood, and wind has not changed very much. It would not be substantially different. There have been some changes, but not enough to really impact the cost, other than the increased cost of materials right now.
Right.
But the actual older structures, most of them are below flood elevation. They're using materials and methods that are not used today, and to build it back would be you would not be able to build it back
Yeah.
for the same amount of money as what it's worth right now. So.
How's TWIA different from TDI windstorm?
So that's kind of where I think the discrepancy comes in. People don't understand the difference. They think that TWIA, because it's Texas Windstorm Insurance Association and Texas Department of Insurance Windstorm Division, they think they're the same thing, but they're really not. So TDI Windstorm is a state agency, and it oversights these structures within the 14 coastal counties. And they want to ensure that all the buildings are being built to the building code and they can maintain insurability. And they're the ones that oversee, they have their own team of inspectors. They'll do non-structural inspections at no charge. So if you wanted to change your windows or your roof, they'll come and do that for you. But if you're doing something structural, you have to have an engineer. So they also oversee the engineers that have, like myself, who've been appointed as qualified appointed inspectors, and we oversee construction projects and certify that the construction meets the state's insurance criteria.
Okay.
So they actually are the ones that issue the certificates, and that's what everybody's always looking for, that WPI 8 certificate. They issue those certificates on new structures, additions, repairs, etc.
And that was my next question. What is the WPI 8? And can several people use it when you get one?
Yeah, anybody can use it. It transfers with the home. It's a WPI 8. It's called the Certificate of Compliance, and it's on any qualified project. We would recommend insurability, and TWIA will issue that certificate. Or TWIA will use that certificate to make an underwriting decision on issuing a policy. So basically, if you want to have a TWIA policy, you have to have a WPI 8 for your structure. Right. Even a lot of private insurers will want to see that WPI 8 for the structure. Well, say right now you're like, hey, I'm going to use State Farm, I'm going to use USAA, I'm going to use whoever, somebody's going to write me private, or hey, I don't even want to carry insurance and I'm going to do what I want. Well, that's great. That's fine for you right now. But what happens if you decide you need to get a mortgage on it later? What happens if you need to pass it to your kids and they need a mortgage? They need all these certificates in place. So even if you're not going to use it right now, even if your insurance company doesn't need it right now, even if you aren't planning on insuring the property right now, you still should get the certificates, because it's so much harder to go back after the fact and try to figure out how to fix everything and get those certificates.
And that's part of what Aaron and Franklin does, right?
Yeah, we do a lot of those things. We do it ongoing during construction. We'll do the design, we'll do the inspection, we'll do the certification. And then if we do have structures that have had improvements done previously, we do a lot of forensics to try to figure out if they do qualify. Sometimes they qualify, sometimes they don't, depending on what was done, how it was done, how much information we have, how many photos we have, and how much disassembly we can do without tearing everything up. But we have to make sure that we feel like it was built to the proper standard in order to recommend that certification. So
right. Y'all had a TWIA board meeting on Tuesday, and we're not going to talk about it right now, but our next show is going to be talking about what came in, because they were pushing for a price increase. And we're going to have that on the next show, so let's not spill the beans yet. But we're going to start doing some shows here with her, talking about insurance and TWIA and changes periodically. It's been great finally meeting you. I've had Dave on the show for several times, and y'all have been a big part of Team Bolivar down here for now going on, I think, 3 years, I think. And so want to thank you for everything you do and everything you do down here on Bolivar, because when I hit, y'all more or less set up shop over here, along with Galveston and Beaumont and everywhere else along here. And so you were a big part of getting Bolivar put back together, I know, through the engineering part of it, whether it was home design, engineering, looking at stuff. So anyway, we're going to head on out. Chandra, thanks for joining us today, and we'll be back next week, and we're going to talk about TWIA and price increases. So make sure you join us. Until next time, I'm David with Bolivar Live. Y'all have a great day, great week. Come see us. God bless, and bye-bye.